Thank you for inviting me tonight. My name is Michael Kehs. I'm from Upper Bucks County, Pennsylvania, and I've been working with wood since I was a kid, actually. But sometime around the time I was 20 years old, I got into wood carving, and it was about 1981, 86. I got into wood turning, and that was because I needed to make a base for a backgammon board. Backgammon board had dragons carved into the top of it, and I needed to turn a base for it. And my friend Dave Hardy, he showed me how to do that. Anyway, from there, the rest was history. After a while, after I started turning, I got well, you know, you guys have been turning. It's so intoxicating, you know. You get started on something and you just want to work till it's done. With wood carving, that would take a week or 2 weeks, and you start turning it. You get a finished project in a night. In a couple hours, you have a beautiful bowl. So for about 4 years, I didn't do any wood carving, just wood turning, just exploring the turning. And from there, you know, around 1990 or 91, I decided, you know what, I used to be pretty good at that wood carving, so I should do that again. This time, instead of swapping one for the other, I put the two together. And so from about the early 90s till now, I do wood carvings on my turnings or texturing and things like that. I'm always trying new things. As a matter of fact, the latest thing that I'm trying, teaching myself, is something called repoussé, and that is hammering shapes into metal. And I'll pass this around. This is what I've been teaching myself how to do. That's copper flashing, and you make a bunch of really polished tools, and you tap these shapes into the metal. Anyway, I put those things like that onto my horns, like I have over here. There's copper work on these horns. There's no actual repoussé on those. There is some texturing on the copper and things like that. But teaching myself the repoussé is because I wanted to put some dragons onto some of my Celtic drinking horns. Just seemed like the right way to go. So eventually you can get to something like that. We're not going to do that tonight because I don't know enough about that to teach you how to do that. So it is a lot of fun to learn. So what I'm going to teach tonight, though, or demonstrate tonight, is something that I like to call burn texturing. And burn texturing is wood burning pens of different shapes, more like branding irons. If you know Cynthia Gibson, I don't know, do any of you guys know that name?
Yes.
She has a lot of finesse with a burning pen. I used to be a stonemason.
Very nice. I
use my burning pens like a stonemason would use burning pens. You know, lots of smoke and fire and force. So I don't do what she does at all. Although I've been trying to do a little bit of that. I want to learn a little bit more how to do that. It'll be a little bit more finesse to that. But so what I'm doing is mostly just texturing and some coloring. So somewhere around 2008, I started using cup burrs, and that's what these are here. You can see that. Does that zoom in at all?
Yeah, it does.
Okay. Anyway, the first time I saw cup burrs was in the mid-'80s. As a wood carver, a friend of mine carved a grapevine on a walking stick, and the grapes on the grapevine were these perfect little semi-spheres. They were. And as a wood carver, I didn't know how the heck he did that. I was a pretty good wood carver, and I couldn't carve them that perfectly. So what he did is he had taken a finish nail and hollowed the end of the finish nail out, and just burnished them in an NSK carver. And so from then I knew about that. I just never really used it. For almost 20 years. Anyway, in 2008, I started making this series. It was called Contagion Series, and that was my start into doing the textures on the work. And from there, I just kind of branched out, learned a bit from Graham Priddle and guys like Graham Priddle and Jack Vessery and guys like that. So what I do is, you know, kind of a combination of all those things. Lately, what I've been getting into is doing shows up there. From this angle, I don't see how well that looks, so you guys are gonna have to let me know that looks okay or not. So what it is there's steps and there's beads, and those kind of textures have got me invited to Australia to teach the Australians how to do that. And so I guess I figured that must be a pretty decent way to go, so I've been going that way for a while now. So when I start doing that, I start out drawing these teardrop shapes, and I just do them by eye. And so I'm just making these nice little curves, and just by eye. Somebody had said before, you put down lines like this, you just put down enough of them, sooner or later you get the right line. Yeah, well, it's kind of the way I'm doing it. So you just make these teardrop shapes, and anytime I come off of that with another teardrop, I come off on a tangent. And so I just make these overall basic shapes, and then I'll put the steps inside of those. As I'm going along, if you've got any questions, just give a holler.
What kind of wood are you using?
This is basswood, and just because I have that. One of my favorite woods for doing this in is actually box elder. And so I'm the crazy guy. I look for box elder that doesn't have red in it. Yeah. And it's actually not as easy to find as you think.
Yeah.
It usually does have the red in it. And that's why I don't have any here. But I do like that. Actually, another one too that's really good is holly. Holly's another good one. Cherry's not too bad. Maple's pretty good too. Basswood is soft, so it carves and burns easily. So we just want to kind of finesse this curve just a little bit better. Oh, having an eraser is nice, and for that, just a little battery-powered eraser. It is like the coolest little thing. There's a little story about how I ended up getting that. I saw Dixie Big's demonstration a few years ago, maybe it was down in Florida, and she had this little motor about this big with a sander on the end of it, and it was like 150 bucks. And wow, gotta be something cheaper than that. So I thought, hey, what about one of those electric erasers? 1/4 inch in diameter. I figured I could probably do that. It spins too fast. And then it hit me. It's like, this thing here, I can get this to spin down to about 1 or 2 RPMs if I want. So it's the perfect tool. I already have it. All I got to do is make a little sanding disc to go on there. So anyway, that's where this came from, and it was kind of a good buy because I really like it. So when I put the steps in, I try to keep them fairly small. The larger the step, the more burning you got to do. But each one of these steps then comes off on a tangent, and they just kind of follow the same kind of curve. So I don't want to put a whole lot of these steps in here because they're all going to be similar, and they don't have to follow the shape that you have. Like these here are following the original shapes that I put in. They don't have to follow that. Like on this one here, instead of bringing the steps in this direction, there's no reason that I can't take these steps in the other direction. The main thing is to keep them tangential. It just look better that way.
What's that word you just used?
Tangential? That just means that the lines are coming off sort of like an offshoot of a curve. We're not coming off at an acute angle. We're not coming off at a sharp angle. Coming off at a real low angle. That's all that means. really all these steps are doing, eventually what they're going to do is they're going to pick up light. And shadow. So after these are drawn in like that, then we have to outline that with a knife. Now, I make all my own tips. I didn't used to. I used to buy tips, but I ended up buying a bunch of nichrome wire, and it's not really that difficult to make a knife tip. So this knife tip here started out 18 gauge nichrome wire, and so what you would do is hammer this, bend it in half, hammer it flat on an anvil, and after it's hammered flat, you just file it and sharpen it like a knife. I know it sounds like a lot of work, but it's really not that much work. And you want it sharp, but it doesn't have to be sharp like a carving knife, but almost. The heat's going to do a lot of the work for you. If we have time, I brought some wire along and a little anvil, and maybe we'll be able to make a tip or two. So I usually have it fairly hot to do the outlining. So the first thing I do is these major outside lines. It's nice to have a fan handy. Blow the smoke over to you guys. Sorry about that. At home, there's no one else there, so I just blow the smoke over. I have 10-foot ceiling, so most of the smoke ends up there. Except in the summertime, I can have the windows open and get blow it right outside. There are smoke eaters that you could get. I don't know a lot about them, other than they're probably more expensive than I can afford. But you could get something like that.
So you use a combination of turning the tool and turning the wood.
Oh yeah, even if I'm working on a horn like that, I'll usually have it in my hand. If I had it in my hand now, you wouldn't see it, so I'm trying to work up here. But yeah, no, I would turn the wood and turn the tool at the same time.
How do you prevent the thing to follow the grain lines all of a sudden?
Well, you can use a lighter touch, a cooler piece of a cooler tool, a lighter touch, and hold the tool at more of an angle so that if it was straight up and down, it would easily get into the grain pattern in the wrong direction. If you hold it a little bit more of an angle, it kind of goes where you want it to go a little bit more evenly.
I'll try that the next time.
I do have it a little bit hot right now. And a close-grained wood, too, is going to work out better for you, too, like the woods that I talked about.
Yes.
Basswood, holly, box elder. Grain's not as pronounced. Hard and soft grain is almost non-existent. So you have all about the same hardness. Okay, so after we get in the major shapes,
They're heat detectors.
then we're going to do the steps.
I may turn on the.
Seeing the coloring, or I should say the whiteness on your knuckles, you got quite a grip on that.
Good. I wouldn't think so.
You turn white there.
Yeah, well, I guess I do. I hadn't thought of that. As you can see, we're turning the tool, or turning the wood. Is actually very helpful here. When you're doing tight curves, you do have to have the tool, you do end up moving the tool a little bit more vertical.
I guess it takes a lot of practice if you're not going to work on
It's the same thing, except that now you've got a third, like right now I've got basically two axes. I've got this rotating this way and this one. With being round, you're also going to be twisting it in this direction. And so I don't see it as a lot different, but I mean there is that extra motion involved. So if you always start in the original groove, you should be able to get a more tangential, or a tangent line coming off of that. Doesn't always work. So, using the knife like this here, or any of these burning tools, it's a combination of the heat of the tool, the hardness of the wood, and the speed at which you're moving. The harder the wood, you might want more heat. The more complex the curves, you might want a hotter tool if it's a harder wood. If it's a softer wood, you might want to be cooler so that you can control the movement of the tool a little bit easier without burning the wood too deeply. So I did end up cooling the tool off a little bit. All right, so that's the starts to this. So all of these areas are outlined. The next thing I want to do is I want to angle each one of these steps. I'm going to pass one of these around that's been done to. Start with that one. So that the piece that's going around has been inked with India ink, so it's blacker than what you would normally get. When you think of burning, you think it gets black, but it actually just gets a dark brown. So with the India ink, it gets dead black, and that's a good place to start our coloring from. But you'll notice on those steps, some of those steps will be angled to the left, and some are to the right. Some of them have angled to the center. And so there's just three different ways that you can make those steps. And really what's important is that you have the steps so that it catches the light. And that's just a way of being able to accent the colors that you put on there. So that was the knife tip. And you always want to have handy a wire brush. So brass brush, this is what happens when you're using these tools, is that they get carbon on them. So this is a knife tip. I'm going to pass that around. I think I have a tip that is bent in half but not hammered. If I do, I'll pass that with that, and you can see. Okay, never mind. I guess I don't. Oh wait, here it is. It fell out. So here's two steps in making a knife tip. So you're going to bend it in half like that, and then this one is hammered flat. Now where this is hammered flat, the next thing I would do to that is file that into a knife shape. So I like the spear point, which is the one going around. And this one I could file into a spear point, and then I'm going to file the edges so that it's nice and sharp. So I'll pass those around, and that's fairly simple to do, and you don't need much. So this is just a metal cutting tool, and that's my anvil, and this is my hammer. So you don't need a lot. You don't need a great big anvil. You don't need a great big piece of metal or anything like that. It'd be nice if it was sort of smooth like this is, and on a solid table, and then you're just going to hammer that nichrome wire flat. Anytime you work with metal, nichrome wire in particular, if you bend it more than once or twice, it's going to break. When you hammer on it, it's liable to break. So So you want to be able to anneal that. So you're going to heat it bright red. And you can heat it in with the machine because it's going to get it bright red if you've got a machine that'll get hot enough. If not, you use a torch and heat it with a torch. And the little torch like that is going to get the nichrome wire plenty hot. So you don't need a great big torch either. We're not working with big pieces of metal. So you heat it up, then you can work it some more. After you work it some more, it's going to get work hardened again. So then you heat it up again and let it cool gently. And then you should be able to get it to a point where you can make a nice knife out of that. So the next thing is to put those steps in. This tool is basically the same one as the one going around. It's a spear point, but I have it bent on a little bit of an angle. You see that? Like a little spatula kind of a bend. And that just allows me to get in there a little bit better to put those steps in. So it's sort of a carving tool, but I'm not actually removing chips of wood. It's more like working with clay. I'm melting the wood back, and which is kind of, for me as a wood carver, that was a little bit hard to get my head around. I was always taking a hammer and a chisel and removing chips of wood. And guys like Jack Vessery, Derek Weideman, they're using this hot knife like a carving tool, and they're melting the wood back, and that's what I'm doing here. I'm just kind of pushing the wood back. And so I've got it pretty hot right now, but we'll see if it's too hot or not. So the hotter it is, the quicker it's going to do what you want, and it may be too quick. And if it's too hot, then you just have to cool it off, and you get a feel for that. See that carbon building up on there? Guessing we're under the gym. Because of that, or there's a lot of thunder going on outside. Is that dancing? I haven't danced in a while, but I don't remember it being quite like that. So I'm doing the same kind of a thing. Do you see that glow on there? That's the carbon. If you don't get the carbon off, it affects the way that the tool interacts with the wood. It may not leave a smooth surface. It may actually stick to the wood a little bit and pull some of the grain out. It's not a great big deal, but the surface is not going to be the same, so you're going to have to go over it and smooth it off a little bit if you don't get that carbon out of there.
Mike, where'd you get your burn box?
So anytime we do the burning on the wood, we want to get the carbon off the wood too, eventually. And we can do that with the wire brush. I normally don't like to use the wire brush on the basswood because the basswood's soft. The wire brush can actually add its own texture to the surface. And if that's not what I'm after, then I got to be careful about that. So a stiff bristled brush that's not wire, like this one here, is just like a little horsehair brush, and it's fairly stiff. That'll get most of the carbon off without adding any extra texture to the wood. Most of the other woods, the maples, cherries, holly, things like that, the brass brush works fine. So that one's basically angled away from the tail, and if you do it so each one of these steps is more or less convex. If you taper it towards the tail, they end up being a little bit more concave. So that's what I was saying earlier about, the direction that you make these steps. It's just something to think about. And I'll do both of them on a piece. They don't have to all be one way. Of course, the third way would be angling it towards the center of each step. So I make my own hand pieces. And if you're going to do that, I use 16 gauge wire for this, but some of the 16 gauge wire is fairly stiff, like this one, and some of it's a bit more flexible. Find the stuff that's a little bit more flexible. This is a little bit restricting when I try to move it because it's stiffer. I didn't know that at the time, but I do now. Eventually I may, then I won't change it. And I should change it. Oh, by the way, I have 10 copies of sources of supplies and how to build this handpiece. There's other things in there too that we're really not going to cover tonight, like how to make the Celtic drinking horns. Pardon?
Where you get the burner?
This unit?
Yes.
This unit, unfortunately, is not available. I got it at a flea market for $40.
Wow.
And I figured it was going to work. I didn't know exactly that it was going to work, but it's my favorite driver. But there are Coalwood. Coalwood makes a wood burning device. If you want to build something that can get a lot of power, a lot of heat, Graham Priddle's charger, battery charger, just Google Graham Priddle wood vaporizer, and you can build one out of a battery charger. And I have.
Crafted Packer for sell them, right?
Pardon?
Crafted Packer.
Maybe.
Grizzly.
Do they?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. This gets really hot. It has a high and low output.
We made about burners with Graham when he was here
Yeah.
2 years ago.
Yeah.
But it's become more difficult because all the new battery chargers have electronics in there.
They're all automatic.
They
Yeah.
take out, so you have to bypass the electronics and you have to put in an extra fuse, so
Yeah.
you have some protection.
Well, I had a couple of manual ones that I did, and I never put a fuse in it, and so I melted them. Because I was doing things I probably wasn't supposed to, but I'm usually pretty good at that. Using tools, I'm the guy that opens a paint can with a hammer. I'm always trying to make my tools do more work than they're intended to do. Actually, we're going to talk about that a little bit later with some of these branding irons. So let me get a couple more steps burned in here. So after you get these steps burned in, they're not going to be as neat and smooth as you want them. They just won't at first. So what I end up doing is cooling the knife off a little bit, going back over and basically burnishing those steps. And you can burnish them nice and neat and clean. I don't know that I'll do a whole lot of that tonight. Just basically doing what I'm doing now with a cooler knife, and it will smooth them out nicely. As far as how deep do you go, it's going to be a matter of personal preference. I generally don't go a whole lot deeper than a 1/16 and maybe at most an 1/8 of an inch. Really, I'm just trying to catch the light. One of the other things you may need to do too is these steps they have a riser and they have a tread. I'm mostly melting the treads back and leaving the risers go. But sometimes the risers, the vertical parts, get a little bit out of alignment. So they might not be as nice and neat and round. So you can cool the knife off and actually just kind of go back around and smooth them out a little bit. It really depends on how anal you want to be about it. And usually I am. Like a photographer friend of mine had said, he says, better to be anal retentive than anal repulsive. So I figured that was a good thing. I've always thought that once you say something is good enough, then probably you know it's actually not good enough. You just got tired of working on it. And I've decided that what makes good work is just keeping at it until it's right. Whatever that is. When I was in Australia, the Australians had a piece of Velcro on their sleeve, and they had one of these Velcro to their arm, and they would just, so it was nice and handy, but I'm not so sure I wanted to do that.
No.
So what I did at home is I put the Velcro on my bench, so that's like attached to the bench, and I didn't have to hold it. I know one of the other fellows that I was doing something like this, he's had it in his hand like this, and that works too. It's nice and handy that way. But if you slip, you're gonna end up getting a blister somewhere.
That's never happened.
We don't talk about that. It has never happened today. We ain't done yet. No, I've had my share of boo-boos over the years. If you do something that requires a Band-Aid, I actually think that's a good thing, because it's going to hopefully prevent you from needing stitches the next time or something else. It's like, oh, okay, we probably shouldn't do that. That hurt a little bit. Put a Band-Aid on there and move on. That might not be so bad. Taught a class 2 weeks ago, and a fellow, just me and one fella. He was a deaf man, so we had an interpreter. That was really interesting class to teach. The man had a really good sense of humor, and that was good. And it took a while for me to remember just to not, well, he was working on the lathe, it took a while for me to remember not to just talk to him, because he wasn't hearing a word of it. So I had to remember to tap him on the shoulder and then get the interpreter to, basically tell him what I needed to tell him. So I'm not going to go and burnish these up, but this is not too bad as far as the burning is concerned. You guys can take a look at that. We're going to work on this piece then. So after all the steps are in like that, so when that comes back around, I'm going to use that again. But after all the steps are in, or even just some of the steps, because you may be working on a larger surface, you do some of the steps there. Then what you're going to want to do then is to work with what I do is the cup burrs. And I got a bunch of different sizes here. And I always start with the larger sizes first. And basically, with the larger the cup burr, the fewer of them I put in. So the cup, like one large one like this here, this I think is 15 millimeters. I'm probably going to put 3 or 4 of them. On a surface like this, maybe only 2, maybe 3 at the most on this surface. And then as they get smaller, they'll end up getting more of them. So, and I won't use every size. I may skip 2 or 3 sizes and go down. This is 15, so maybe I'd go down to 11 or maybe a 12, something like that, and then go with some of the smaller ones. And I want the larger ones to be pretty random, just kind of wherever.
Remind me what they are?
Cup burrs?
Cup burrs.
Yeah, cup burrs, yeah. If anyone ends up being interested in anything like that, MDI, I don't remember what that stands for.
Mount Desert Island.
This fellow from Maine, Wayne, he found some that were the large cup burrs like this here, and a smaller set like that. We just started selling them. As a matter of fact, I just got in the mail today 3 or 4 sets of them. So if anyone's interested, I have some here. Before he found these larger ones, the biggest one that I could find was from Otto Fry, and that was a 10 millimeter, and that is this size. And that was okay. I mean, I used that a lot, but now we've got something a little bit bigger. I like to use
So the
those.
smaller burrs, have you tried the ones from Harbor Freight?
Do they have cup burrs?
They have the smaller burrs,
Oh, I don't know. I haven't tried any of
the
them.
ball burrs.
Oh, no, I haven't. No. So, the burning pen makes some smoke. This makes some smoke. This is going to be, I'm going to do it in a softer wood just because it's pretty big, and I'm only going to put 1 or 2 in because it's nothing at all like a burning pen. You'll see. Yes.
The units that's being circulated, did you make those tips, or is that stock tips?
Oh, the knife tips?
The square block.
I'm not sure.
What did you just send around?
Oh, the block?
Yeah, the block, the tip that you used for that.
Oh, yeah.
You made that tip?
Well, these cup burrs I did not. No, I did make some cup burrs a long time ago, but I haven't made any for a while.
Now, the previous ones where you made the hills and the valleys.
Oh.
So you made the hills.
Yes.
Yes, you made them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you use anything to harden the steel or
No, just heating them.
anything?
Heating them.
Bend it, bend you make them.
Well, they last pretty long, but yeah, they will break. The knife tips actually break probably the quickest because they're hammered so thin. And as I'm using them, when they're red hot, they're soft, so they move a little bit. They move a little bit, and the more that they move, the sooner they're going to break. They're going to do that one way or the other. So, if you can make your own, it probably takes me 5 minutes to make it. Maybe 10 at the most. And you can buy the tips too. I don't know what they cost anymore. They're too long. I just prefer to make them. These work better when they're hot, so eventually this will get warm, So you can see that this one makes a lot of smoke.
That's not gonna set it off, is it?
There's supposed to be heat, not smoke.
All right.
So, but they do take a tool that's gonna be able to withstand that kind of torque. So some of the cheaper versions of these tools, they might trip a breaker, you know, a fuse in the back of the machine, so you get the tool hot, so you get it moving. So once it's hot, it actually went in a lot quicker. So I would put in, you know, a few of this size. Oh, the other thing is I forgot my tweezer, but don't touch them. Yeah, don't ask me how I know that, but don't touch them. They get really, really warm. So I put in a couple of that size, and then I put in a couple of the next size down. This is 11 millimeters. You have to make sure you get deep enough as well, otherwise you'll end up with a little flat spot. The other thing to talk about, if you're going to put these on a wood turning, the diameter of this, so this is 11 millimeters, so half of that at 5.5 millimeters is how deep it's going to end up going. So if you have, you know, a 5 millimeter thick bowl and you put this in there and you go all the way in, it's going to go straight through. So you have to make sure if you're going to use these larger burrs that your wood is thick enough to handle it.
What do you call it? Piercing.
What do you call it? Piercing? It would make some nice round piercing holes. Here's one here. I'm going to pass that one and this one. They are this. As a matter of fact, these are exactly the same. They're both 10 millimeter, and I want you to look at the edge, at the rim. As it goes around, the one that's clean and unused has got a little bit of a flat surface on the rim, and so do all these. I don't know if you can, if that'll pick that up on there. But this top surface actually has a little bit of a flat surface there. And so what you end up having to do is to take this tool against a grinding wheel or a diamond burr or something and grind the outside diameter of this in until the little teeth show up. And you'll see on that one there that there's teeth inside of these.
Yeah.
When you get the outside diameter in small enough, those teeth stick up. And the reason that you need to do that is, well, let's show you. What's going to happen is this tool is going to have a hard time starting into the wood because of that flat surface. See how that wants to skate across?
Yes.
When the little teeth show up, that'll go right into the wood. And I can get this to work, but you really have to concentrate on holding that thing steady so that it'll go in. But the other thing that I don't like about this is that it also leaves a wider moat, for lack of a better term, around that bead. The ones that are going, the one that is been ground, it's pretty much a knife edge with little teeth sticking up, like a serrated knife edge there. And so the size of the moat is much, much narrower. So you don't have as much of a flat surface at the bottom of these grooves. So there's a plus to it for that. Try not to melt your table. Okay, so after we've got a couple of the larger ones, then I want to go with some smaller ones. And I always start with the larger ones and I just keep working down smaller and smaller. So I did put some of the 11 millimeter, no, just one. Let me put a couple more in there.
You ever have to sharpen those little things?
I haven't yet. Yeah. Well, like I said, my friend used a nail, you know, back in the early 80s. And so we're just burning and burnishing the wood. So I don't think, they don't have to be real sharp. We just can't really have that flat surface. It doesn't work so well.
How fast are you spinning?
Right now I'm spinning at 40,000.
40,000?
40,000, yeah.
And it's the friction that's heating it up.
It's the friction, yep. Yep, we are burning with friction. What's that?
Go to the dentist office
Oh,
and hang
yeah.
out there.
Hopefully they're not using cup burrs on your teeth.
Yeah, yeah. You know, I offered to work on my wife's teeth with this, but she said no. You know, and I thought she trusted me too. As you can see the smoke coming off of this, it's way, way more than the wood burning pens. So then we go down to another size smaller. When I finally get down to about 1/8 of an inch, I think that's what we're going to go with next. What I end up doing with this one, now this is just, these are arbitrary rules that I make up for myself. No reason, there's no really any rhyme or reason to why I do this. I just do it, and I actually end up thinking it looks better. But when I get down to about this size, I kind of make a trail with it. And I start connecting these larger dots with this trail of 1/8 inch diameter beads. And I don't make it a straight path either. These also, even though they're spinning, they end up getting a lot of carbon in them. So this really wore out brush is great for cleaning that tip out. You see, the smaller you get, the easier they go in. So this piece of wood is not nearly as hard as it ought to be. And I think it's just this one particular side. The beads are actually breaking off.
You're using the metal part?
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah, they're laying on the table here. That's the first. That's interesting. You see, I have my little finger on the work.
Yeah.
That really is important to help control the tool. And you want to do that whether you're carving with a knife or with a power tool like this, even when you're on the wood lathe. I want my students to be connected to the lathe somehow. You just don't hold on to the tool and let the tool on the tool rest. If you can, I want to have part of your hand on the tool rest. As a matter of fact, I like to call it a hand rest as much as a tool rest. You get way more control by doing that. So some time ago, I tried to get one of the wood burning pen companies to make me some cup burrs for the wood burning pen. And the guy had the idea for about a week. I think it was, maybe it was Trent. I'll think of it. Right now I don't remember. But anyway, I told him what I needed. I think I might have even sent him one of these. So here's one that I made. And that's an 1/8 inch diameter cup burr. And the reason I wanted to do that, I was thinking, maybe erroneously, but I was thinking that the heat that these cup burrs are generating is going to go down the shaft and affect the bearings of my tool. So I thought, okay, if I can burn them in, maybe that would be better. Well, the fellow that I asked, he had the idea, like I said, for about a week. He decided he couldn't do it. Maybe he just couldn't make money out of it or whatever, I don't know. So I ended up making a couple myself. And that's one. I don't use the 1/8 inch diameter one anymore, but I use the smaller ones. And this is another piece of 18 gauge wire, folded over, hammered not flat, but hammered tight. And then I took a little round diamond burr and just ground a little divot in the end of that. And so now this is going to be my next cup burr to fill in the smaller spaces. So I really like this this texture, this kind of texture. It's fairly easy to do, and I think it looks good together. Now, I might use one or two other sizes in here. Yeah, like I said, coming from being a stonemason, I want things to happen pretty quick. A lot of this texture work I started doing because I didn't like sanding. I know you guys like doing that. I know.
Yeah, we love
I'm
sanding.
one of those guys that don't really like sanding. Actually, I have a student. He says, "I'll come over to the house. I'll sand for you. I love sanding." I'm like, wow, I didn't know there was anybody that loves sanding.
Mike, can something like that be done with a CNC machine?
Good question.
I don't mean to steal your thunder.
I don't know. Good question. Why not? But you'd have to program it.
Yeah.
Yeah, see, what I see is you have the sensitivity in your fingers when it's going too deep, you just pull up. But I don't know if you could do that with CNC, the depth as much as the outside.
Well, yeah, you'd have to set a particular depth for each different burr.
Yeah.
Like we just do it until it's deep enough. You know, the machine can't think that way.
Certainly would save a little bit of time.
Yeah, yeah. But what I do is, as best I can, I try to keep things pretty random. I like random. And the reason I like random is because making a pattern is tough. You know, if you try to make a pattern and you have a little bit off, you're going to see it really easy. I don't know if you guys get on the internet at all, but there's on Facebook they send around these little things with like all 8s and one number 9. I don't know. For me, I can find it in like 2/3 of a second. It's like it's that easy to see, and that's kind of what I'm talking about. Patterns are great if they're perfect, and they're almost never. And so I'm going the other way. I'm going to try and keep away from patterns as best I can. But we as humans like things to be habitual. I mean, probably put your left shoe on every day first, or your right shoe. When you brush your teeth, start over here and go over there every day. And we kind of do that, and for just most of the things we do. So when I'm working here, I really do try to be more random. So as a matter of fact, as I'm going along, if I feel like I need to go to the right, I just go left turn, and I just like make myself do something completely different. That being said, completely random, there'd be, you know, a cat face in here and a tree and a car here, and that'd be completely random. So we don't want to do that either. We still want to have some rules, and that's where these arbitrary rules that I come up with, that's why I have those. I want this thing to look like the last one, but not exactly the same. You know, because people they like what that looks like, and so we want it to be similar, just not the same. And I want it to be pretty random, pretty different. I tried doing textures similar to this with the carving tool, you know, like you were saying with the round burrs and things like that, and I never was satisfied. The burrs always left fuzzies, but with the burring pen, I don't know. I particularly happen to like it better. I think I get a better product. Now when you get this small, I can take, and you wouldn't really know the difference. This is 22 gauge wire, so it's very thin. There's no divot in the end of it. it's like a little ball. So actually, when I put this onto the wood, it's going to be the reverse of what I was doing up to now. But you won't know because it's so small. What it's doing is it's adding a little texture to the area. Oh, make sure you're not too hot, or you'll melt the wire right in half. Too much talking, not enough thinking. So when I do this, even though these are little divots and not little beads, it won't look a whole lot different. But it's smaller, so I can get into a smaller area, or sometimes between the larger beads, there's little points that stick up that are too small for the cup burr, but not too small for this. I took a class with Ben Foe a bunch of years ago. We were doing piercings and things, and as a wood carver, I really had a hard time with the black surface that the piercing tool left inside the piercings. Once I got over that, then I was okay with how that all looked and everything else. You just have to, for me, I had to let go of that. It had to be clean, clear wood. It couldn't be black, kind of thing. And so that's what this is all about here too. If you want to see the wood, well, this is not the texture for you. You're going to need to use carving burrs or something, because these are going to burn. The cup burrs and the burning pen, of course, it's designed for that. But most of what I'm doing ends up getting painted anyway, which is why box elder without the red in is good for me. Basswood, clear, clear holly, things like that. So anyway, when these beads in that are in between and mixed in with the steps, that ends up looking quite nice. This one in particular. After we get the beads and the steps in there, then we put the ink on there. See, there's one space here I haven't done. We're going to leave it out. I won't bother with that. After they're inked, then they get color. Before we get into the color, let's do some more branding irons. Any other questions about the beads or the steps? I mean, it's pretty basic, but it's also pretty effective. So, branding irons. They are going to be wires that are bent into particular shapes. So this is yin and yang shape.
So that's a loop?
It's like yin and yang, so it's got that two little fishtails inside of the circle. Yeah. And basically it's folded over and a twist with the wire with the wires. Well, before I do that, I mean this is just a little point, but it's more than just a little point, because what we can do with this, I was saying before about using tools in other ways than they were meant. Since I made the tools, I know what I meant to do when I made it. This actually is made for me to sign my name. So. That's what the tool was designed for, and I already used it for something else with the textures on here. But another way to use this tool is like this. And that would make a really interesting border around the edge of the bowl. Very simple, but it's got the texture, so it's going to catch the light. That's a different way of using that particular tool. So now this one is that yin and yang. It's just a twisted circle. So a lot of these are better used as borders or things like that. They're better than, say, filling in a field. And so if you use this enough, you could fill in a field like I'm doing here. And I don't prefer this one for filling in. I like this one more for edging, things like that. When I'm working on a particular piece, say a vessel or something like that, I'm going to stick with 3 or 4, maybe even 5 different stamps, and I'll just use those in different ways. So having enough hand pieces that I don't have to unscrew the screws and screw them back in, and just go to the next one. That's handy. This one, is ice cream, soft ice cream. Unless you're a 12-year-old boy, then it's a little poop. And I think I'm pretty much a 12-year-old boy at heart anyways. So this one is another good one for edging. But that being said, if we use this on an edge, that's what I like to see. And then we can this direction. And we end up with some pretty interesting negative spaces. So you could fill in a field with this. And afterwards, I encourage you to come up and take a look at these here. And I can pass them around too. There's a bunch of them here. I don't use this one a lot. I have used it a bit earlier, but I haven't liked it. And this one is rope. So it's nichrome wire that's been folded over and twisted.
You bought all separate wires for all your tips?
Pardon?
You bought all separate wires for your tips?
No, I bought rolls of wire. Take a look at this when you have time. But get it by the roll, and it's cheaper per foot this way, but you end up with a lot of wire.
But I'm saying all of them, your plugins, bought all separate ones on the tips.
Well,
Because usually when they sell you the set, they sell you a bunch of tips with one wire.
oh,
You said with one hand piece.
you mean hand piece?
Yeah.
So I make my own hand pieces, and I got a bunch of them. I probably have 15 of them, I guess. And you know, if I feel like I need more, I'll make another one. And really, it's pretty simple to make a hand piece. So what we've got, this is a piece of Osage orange. Maybe it was 1 inch in diameter to start. I'm going to drill a 3/8 inch hole straight through it. And this paperwork here is going to tell you how to do all that. And then after the hole's drilled into the square block, then I put it between centers and turn the shape. And it doesn't have to be anything in particular. The terminal block that's on here with the plastic, you get that at Lowe's. I used to get them at Radio Shack. Of course, they went out of business. It comes in a strip about that long, and there's a bunch of these throughout. So I'm going to cut that plastic with just 2 of them. This lamp wire is going to get attached to these 2 screws. And then I've got 12 gauge house wire on this end. And that just gives me a little bit of a heat sink, moves the hot part away from my fingers a little bit. Also, it lets me bend it. If I'm going to work in an area like on the horn, sometimes I'm working on the inside curve and you can't get to it straight on. So I might need to bend this so I can get at it at an angle. So they're more adjustable that way. So the 2 connectors that are here are actually the same thing that's inside the plastic. So you just cut the plastic off. Get it under the camera. Okay. So these 2 connectors are what's inside the plastic. And so you just cut the plastic off, and that's what's left over. So you actually could put your tips right into these 2 terminals and then be done with it. I like to add that extra bit of wire just to move it farther out. Some of these I have longer, and some of them are shorter. See on this one here, the 12 gauge wire is a lot shorter. So after the handpiece is turned, then you're going to cut just a 90-degree section out of there to attach. Just cut this 90-degree section out. We can attach the 2 of these. That has a hole between each set. So what I just drill a hole straight through that, and I don't know if you'll be able to see it, but there's a little. The end of the screw comes right through here, so I just kind of file that down, and that's what holds this all together. So it is really easy to make. This tip is important because it can get hot. If you get these from a guitar shop or from a phone jack or something like that, they're going to melt. And what happens when it melts, this end, this little insulator piece right here gets hot and melts. And this end slips sideways, and then it's stuck in your machine. Been there, done that. So you got to take the machine apart, grind that off so you can pull this darn thing out. So don't do that. What you're going to need to do is, I have a link in here to Switchcraft. And Switchcraft has, I think it's a 280, something like that. That's the number of this piece. And it's made with phenolic, or it's made with something that's heat resistant. And they don't melt. A couple of bucks, $2 or $3. This one here came from some wood carving site a while ago, and it was like $15. And it's a lot larger. The Switchcraft ones look just like that. And so that is one of the Switchcraft ones, I believe. And I think it's like $2.50 or something like that. So that's important because otherwise it's going to melt. You're going to wish you had it. All right, so anyway, this rope piece, it's a little bent. So I'm just going to straighten it out a little bit. Are we under the light or under the camera yet? How about that? So you can actually do this and make like links, and you can make chain out of it.
Like, where would somebody go if they want to learn how to do this?
My shop. I teach in my shop all the time, so yeah, you could come to me. Other than that, I don't really know. I don't know anybody else that's doing it. Graham Priddle does some things like this, but he doesn't do what I'm doing. So this is what I like about these tools too, is this fire and smoke. It's just fun.
You ever been any of these wires into your initials?
I haven't done that. I like to sign my name. I like to put my whole name on. And the reason being, back in the early 80s, when I was doing my carvings, I'd carved in MK. And sometime later in the 90s, someone showed me a piece, and I got this piece here, and I don't know who it's from. It just has MK on it. I'm like, yeah, that's me. So now, if I sign Michael Kehs, you can always look at it and go, oh, Michael Kehs made that. So you know who made it. And so that's why I like to sign my name. Like, I just made a bunch of little birdhouses for a craft show. I put MKs on that, because they're too small to put my whole name on. But, so we can use this tool to do basket weaving. Keep the carbon out of there. So basket weave is a good way to fill in a field, an area. I'm not taking my time with this, so some of these have 4, some have 6. If you're going to do this and make a really nice project out of it, take your time and make sure you get the spaces all the same. And you could lay it out with a pencil. So this is one of those places where you're getting a pattern. You want it to be, you want the pattern to be right. So you want to measure it and all that. You want to make sure it's getting down the way you want it. Anyway, so that's that. Another way to do basket weave. Back here. I think I'm going to melt that table if I set one of these down. This one. And, this is another reason to have 2 different pens, because if I was to try and take that piece out of there right away, it would be hot, and I would regret it. So I can set that one down, let it cool, and then change the tip out of a different one. So this is just a coil of 20 gauge. So not the finest wire I've got, and not the heaviest wire I've got. I actually have a piece of 1/8" thick nichrome wire at home, and that's what this cup burr is made out of, 1/8" thick wire.
8 millimeters.
Pardon?
8 millimeters.
No, it's 1/8". 1/8". No, 1/8". Sorry, 1/8". Yeah. So I ground the 1/8" diameter divot in the end, and then with the other diamond tools, I kind of ground it into shape. I took a diamond saw and split it down the middle to get my 2 leads, and yeah, so it was a lot of work, but it did do what I wanted it to do at the time. So this is a coil. And this coil is a lot easier to do basket weave. You're always getting or 4. You do have to make sure you get the right depth. Am I keeping this under the camera? If I'm not, just give me a holler. Okay. I always feel bad for the cameraman because I'm not good at keeping this under camera.
Neither is our camera.
You know, I mean, I want to be in the camera, and I end up moving way too much. Mostly because this is what I do at home. I move it a lot. So this is a good filler for a field or an area. But like I said, I like to use things differently than I intended to. So this one can be used like that. And that is a different way to fill an area. So I'm just dragging this tool along. You see, I still have my little finger on the wood, so I got to be careful, not to burn myself. But that's.
Would you then crisscross that field that you create?
Let's see. I haven't done that yet.
Hashtag
How's that?
try it.
Yep. So let's see what it looks like. Yeah, it makes it an interesting texture. Now this wood's probably not the best wood for it. Means it's softer. The wood is burning away a little bit more than it should. So if I did that on a harder piece of wood, it might end up actually being a nicer texture. But it's not bad either. So what that texture reminds me of one that I like to do, and this one I call broken screen texture. It's done with a knife. You'll see why it's called that in a minute. Just making this appear to be, some old rusty screen, parts of it missing. And so you can fill in an area with that. To me, I like it. I think it's interesting. It's just another way to use one of these tools. And that's blacked over. Everything is black. And you just have the little lines. It's a real delicate texture. It's not the heavy-handed texture that a lot of these other ones are.
What do you use to black over?
The India ink. India ink, yeah. So another thing that we could do is to actually, you were asking about, or someone was asking about my name, my signature. So this is a leaf pattern. I had a bat. I'm a caver, so I crawl underground in the rocks and the mud. Yeah, a lot of people think that too. That's okay. But anyway, I was doing a demonstration up in New Hampshire at a school like this, and we had teenagers there, high school kids, and I sent this bat around, and it was bent a lot like this. And this is a leaf pattern. Anyway, the bat went around, and it came back this little crumpled mess. So I don't have my little bat anymore, but so you can make like all kinds of different shapes. Anything that crosses your mind. You want to keep the amount of metal on one of these fairly small. You don't want to go too large, otherwise a lot of the machines won't get it hot enough.
Well, there's a woman anime, but anyway, there's a gentleman that on the spot, you go do your shopping, you go twist the wire to write your child's name, your own name. You could bring your wire and say, here, use this.
Cool. So the wire is like a decoration? Okay.
Yep, yeah, for a bracelet. Cool. I'm sure he's talented enough that he can make it much smaller.
So this needs a little adjusting.
When you're making your designs, having space between the wires, were they kind of like they touch in one part, two sides of the wire?
Yeah, well when you do the designs, they really can't touch. Like your bends shouldn't touch because the electricity is going to want to take the shortest route. And the whole thing will eventually get hot just be from convection, but it won't get hot from resistance. So yeah, you do have to be careful of that. You see, as I'm coming around here, I don't know if you noticed that this section here didn't burn. The reason that didn't burn, the wire is fairly flimsy on this one. And so it just warped a little bit in the process of using it. So I might need to make it hotter and press less hard. Press with less pressure. That's a neat little pattern. I never liked it just by itself, but I liked it when I did that. And that makes a nice little pattern. You can do several of those on a piece. It's a mess. So it's just India ink. You can get that at any of the art supply stores. And so I put that on with.
Would calligraphers use that?
Good question. Is that what they use?
Sure.
Okay. I don't know.
What was that?
She asked if calligraphers use the India ink. I didn't know. The cup burrs. Does anyone know what they're actually for? They're not for this. They're used in jewelry to round over the ends of wires. I didn't know that either. When I knew jewelers sold them, or jewelry supply people sold them, but I didn't know that they were for that until later.
More for crowning. and you don't cut yourself on the diamonds.
Okay.
Where the diamonds are.
Okay, right. So, that's a pretty damn big piece of wire for crabbing, yeah. Generally, they're using the smaller ones, I believe. So anyway, I put the India ink on with a little child's toothbrush into the jar. You want to scrub it. You want to get the India ink all the way down into the grooves. You want to get it all black. After you've done that, you can take an air hose and kind of blow it off, or just let it dry. Now, my friend Carol Hall, she says that you shouldn't put anything on the wood, any color on the wood, until you seal it. And it's probably a good idea. No, it is a good idea. Not probably, it is a good idea. But the India ink's got some sealant kind of material in it. I don't know what it is. But that actually does seal the wood a little bit too. So she says it's probably okay to do that. And I haven't had any issues with it. Anyway, so India ink on there, and then from there you go with...
So you haven't had any issues by not sealing it?
By not sealing it. I did start sealing it since she had told me that, but I never had any issues before that, so I don't know if I'm helping or hurting.
Was she using a sanding sealer?
She's using hairspray, but this is workable fixative, and that's meant to go over pastels, charcoal drawings, pencil drawings, things like that.
Yeah.
And she says it's exactly the same thing as hairspray. So if hairspray is cheaper, buy that. I had a couple of these cans, I didn't run out of them yet. So this is actually what I put on after I'm all done too. Like all those pieces over there, they've got the textures, they've got the colors, just this. And I call it the non-finish. It adds a layer of protection, but there's no shine to it. It doesn't look like there's anything on it. And that's what I want. I just want to protect it. I don't want it to look like it has anything on it.
I'm not understanding.
Okay.
So I thought you were saying that you wanted to seal the wood as it was burned before you color it.
Right. So I'm doing both.
And then you seal it again after you color it?
I'm sealing the colors.
I see.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep.
And that seals the wood before the color?
Yeah.
It doesn't interfere with the color?
Doesn't seem to.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, why seal it before then? Why not just wait till after the color?
Well, the reason that she likes to seal it is she does something called unpainting. If she gets paint where she doesn't want it, and the wood is sealed, you can wet it and pull it back off. What I'm doing, you're not going to be able to do that.
Or something like Mod Podge.
I don't know what that is.
It's a Mart Supply product.
Okay, what does it do?
It's a clear sealer.
Okay.
It's a glue, it's a seal. Glue.
Oh, yeah, I don't know. I mean, maybe it would work. I'm not sure. I want something as thin as possible, but I don't want it to fill in any of the textures. I just want to seal the wood. I don't want it to fill in any textures. I don't want it to fill in any of the or change any of the colors or anything like that either.
As it comes out of the bottle, it seems that we're not be inclined to do that.
Okay. Okay. Well, maybe that would work. Yeah, I'm not sure. I've never used it. Okay, so I'm doing a dry brush technique. I'm really good at forgetting to bring along my little paint palette, so I've always got something that works, and this is going to work.
Oils?
No, these are acrylic paints. Golden Acrylics. Golden is the company, and they're acrylics. I am not a colorist. I'm not a painter. I don't pretend to be one. I don't even play one on TV. I know what I do, and I like how it works out. I know some of the guys are saying, "Oh, start with your dark colors and end with your light colors." Somehow or another, I got on this habit of starting with yellow, and so I start with yellow. Maybe. I like what I get out of this, and I don't know why it works for me, but it does. And really, it works for me because I don't know any better. I get something that looks half decent. Maybe there's a better way of doing it. So, let's see. We need a paper to blot on. So, dry brushing is what we're going to do. So we're going to put a little bit of brush, a little bit of paint on the brush, and then I want to take all of it off, or almost all of it off. And then I'm just gonna kind of scrub this in. I want this particular coat, I want it to get down into the grooves as best I can. I don't want the very bottom of the groove to be yellow. I want to get it down pretty far, let's put it that way. And so I'm just scrubbing. What you're looking at right here is probably about 10 coats. And each coat is, you know, atoms thick, so there's no thickness to the paint at all. And I didn't invent this. This is something that Jack Vessery is doing. A friend of mine, Mike Kagan, does a real nice job of this. And they probably start with the dark colors and then with the light colors. I don't know if you can see that, but that sort of looks green. Mm-hmm. Isn't that pretty odd? You know, the yellow on top of the black is giving us a green color. That's all right. So what is that, about 3 coats on there already?
Yeah.
It's still sort of black and sort of green. Okay, so after we do that, then we're going to go with another color. Let's go with red. Since I'm dry brushing, I mean, I could wash the brush out, but I don't usually bother until the end.
Cheap brushes?
You know, I don't remember. I don't even know what kind of brushes they are. I went into Michael's and I went up to the whole aisle of brushes. And I picked them up and I went like this. Oh, too soft. Ah, that's better. That's a little stiffer. And I want short bristles and I want sort of stiff bristles. Like I said, I don't know anything about paint, but
Maybe stencil brushes.
yeah, stencil brushes are probably good. I think somebody said this was a Colt's foot brush because it's cut on an angle. So that could be. So generally these end up getting 25, 30 coats because they're also very thin. But if you put the paint on too quick, too heavy, then what happens is it fills in the textures and you just lose a lot.
Would a toothbrush work?
You know, I haven't tried that. It might. The bristles might be too far apart, and they might not hold enough paint. Even though, I mean, I don't want to get all the paint out, but of course you can't get all the paint out of it in. How's that?
Or your wife's electric toothbrush?
No. No, I still like my wife. She still likes me.
You're covering the entire block.
Right now I'm not, because I'm going to do this other half with another color.
Okay.
Right now I'm just kind of get enough coats of red on here just so that the color starts to show up. I started out doing this with the throwaway foam brushes,
Yep.
and that works. It works good. These textures seem to be a little bit sharp and coarse, and so they start to tear up those brushes.
Yes.
So after a while, these don't wear out as quickly as the others do. And the others you just throw out, but when they're not working properly because they're tearing, or they're leaving little pieces on there, yeah, it's just time to do something else. Sometimes during a demo, I tend to get lazy. I don't take a lot of paint out. I end up getting more paint on than I want. I haven't done that tonight yet, but you can expect it right now. You're just going to keep doing this and keep building the colors up, and building them up, and building them up. You get a better, I think, a better product if you do it this way than if you just get heavy paint and paint it all heavy all at once. All right, so let's go to a different color. Eventually that's going to get 10 or 12 more coats of red just to bring that red up a little bit more. Let's go with some blue next. My paint palettes at home are just old plastic lids from something. Like this lid, except this lid actually has a purpose otherwise. So there's a couple other textures that I haven't talked about yet while I'm putting this paint down. Sandblasting. Sandblasting on burls is really, really cool. I'm going to pass that piece around. The back side's got a couple of areas that have been just sanded smooth. So you can see the difference between that sanded smooth area and the sandblasted area. Very cool. And this piece here has been burn textured, so torch. Hit that with a torch, get it. You don't want it to actually catch on fire, but you want to get it nice and charred. So you're going to see this surface here is a little lighter in color than this surface. It was all burned at the same time, exactly the same amount of heat. But if you look here, it says this was brass brushed, and down here it was brushed with this stiffer horsehair brush. So you can see the two different qualities. You're not really going to get any of the black on your fingers, not really, on either one. This ends up being a little shinier, so the horsehair brushes are kind of burnishing that a little bit, but you'll feel the texture is pretty close to the same. And so that's two different textures you can do that are not, well, that one's burning, but the other one. I just really like the sandblasting. I just think that's a really cool way to go. With burls especially, or grains that have a pronounced hard and soft grain.
Like ash?
Ash, fir. Fir is useless except for building materials or sandblasting, because it's got such a really soft grain and a really hard grain, and you can get a lot of texture with the sandblasting. As a matter of fact, if you turn it thin enough, you can sandblast all of that softwood away and just leave the ribs of the hardwoods. And Michael Broley has been doing some of that, and it is just a cool thing.
Did you make your sandblaster or burn
I bought one actually from Harbor Freight.
Paul, weren't you offering those sandblaster?
Any longer. Yeah, I'll tell you what, if you get a chance to use it, it's very, very cool. I mean, you can sandblast any woods, really. The more pronounced the grain difference is between hard and soft, the more texture you're going to get. Now that piece of burl that's going around that's been sandblasted,
This one? Oh, that one.
that one, that is red elm burl, and it's just that area that's been sandblasted is pretty, maybe 20, 25 minutes. It's not fast. That was another misconception. I thought, oh, sandblast, I don't have to sand anymore. It's going to take a long time. It takes a long time. You do have to get your tool marks out, because it's not going to take tool marks out. You'll see them through the sandblasting. Maybe you only have to sand to 100 grit just to get the tool marks out, but you do got to get them out, or they will show up.
Should clean wormholes?
Yeah, you can sandblast wormholes out. Yep. I did that with a piece. I had a piece of, no, actually I had a lot of wood in a shed. It ended up being in there for like 15 years. Well, I went in there to take a look at it, and I needed to get into that shed for something, and it turns out that a lot of that wood was buggy. And I just started throwing it out. And you know what, I'm going to put a piece on the lathe. And there was more spaces between the wood than there was wood. And I ended up sandblasting that, and I was kicking myself for throwing so much of it out.
You ever try an airbrush for the paint?
I have an airbrush, but I don't know how I would use it on here, because what I want to do here is I want to get the paint on the ridges. So each layer of paint here, like the yellow, I pushed hard, and I pushed the yellow down as far in as I could almost. The blue and the red, I didn't push quite as hard. I'm keeping that a little higher up.
You blasted this with sand, or did you use the beads? Or?
Glass beads, yeah. The sand doesn't work so good. Sand makes the wood look muddy. It makes it look just bruised. It doesn't look good at all. So anytime I turn burl anymore, if I can, I'm going to sandblast it. I have a piece at home. It's, I don't know, maybe 14 inches in diameter, about this tall, nice shape like that. I mean, it took hours to sandblast it, but it was worth it. It really looked good. Well, I could do that for a long time, but I will end up, I won't on this piece. It's just a practice piece, but. You can see the color starting to build up on there. One more thing. After you've gotten enough of the paint on there, if you want to give it a little bit of pop, and take some white. Do the same thing with white. Just lightly across the peaks.
Is this your job?
This is what I do. Yeah. Nope. I do this. Well, my day job is this, but it's commission, so I do a lot of commission work. And right now, my commission backlog is up till about February or March. So, see, I should have cleaned that. I've got blue in my white, but it's still a lighter color. So I'm just going to do this anyway. It's going to pull it.
Oh, yeah.
See how that it just makes that show up a lot. It's too heavy too quick. It should have been gotten on there in 3 or 4 little coats, real lightly, just lightly build it up. But you get the idea. So I'm going to pass it around, and got any questions? Anything that I didn't talk about that you want me to talk about?
What's that?
So for the tips, I know you use a different kind of metal, but have you tried using brass?
Brass does not have resistance. So nichrome wire, because it's nickel chromium, when electricity goes through it, there's a resistance there. What you could do is you could take the nichrome and wrap it around a piece of brass. Graham Priddle is selling tips that are like that. Copper or brass that's got different shapes, like octagon, circle, and square, and then he's got the nichrome around that. It works, but it's heating up that brass through conduction, so it's taking a long time to heat that up. So, I mean, it's doable, but I haven't found the need for that.
Oh, sorry.
I thought it came out.
The wire you're talking about that you're using, is that the same wire that heating and air conditioning uses?
It's the same wire that's in your toaster.
Oh.
It's the same wire that's in your electric oven. Electric oven's a big, thick wire, but...
So instead of throwing a toaster out, just chop it up and use the wire?
Yeah, well, you know what? Someone had given me these. These are like little springs, and they're nickel chromium wire. Toaster, something like that.
Hair dryer.
Hair dryer. There you go. There's another one. Yeah. If you got one that don't work, you can just take these out of that. I've got ribbon. I bought ribbon. I figure it this way, if I leave a tool that I think is useful on the shelf in the store, how am I ever going to know if I can use it or not? So I found this nickel chromium rivet, and I haven't really found a good use for it yet, but I think I might be able to. And so it's a rivet. It's the same material, and one of these days I'll take the time and sit down and figure out what I can do with it.
In what department did you find that?
On the internet. Yeah, you can find anything. I wasn't even looking for that. I just was looking for, you got it, nickel chromium wire. Found some ribbon. I wonder if we can do anything with that. You never know. I don't have anything like that on the wall with me. But yeah, come take a look. You can see the different tips I've got here.
Is this a food grade?
Yeah, chef, somebody or another, probably.
Paint is water soluble.
What's that?
Paint is water soluble.
You said it was acrylic. Yeah.
Tell us how you make your horn.
Water based.
Oh,
Water based.
Sure.
Easy cleanup.
What do you want to know about them?
You start on a lathe or?
Oh, yeah. The horns, these horns are start out as a champagne, a long champagne flute. So they're that tall. They're 3 inches in diameter, and it's just this real thin curve, real narrow curve. And so these papers that I've got tell you how to do that as well. So then that champagne flute gets cut on angles, and every other one gets turned 180 degrees will give you that. Okay? So if you look inside here, you can see the different segments. If you turn them 180 degrees plus a little bit, then your spiral goes out the side, like that. So, yeah, that was a straight turning. And then what I do is after I cut all the pieces, I decide how I want it to look, hold it together with a piece of tape, and then from there I'm going to glue together the solid part, the tail. Like these are solid as far as you can't see. So when you look in here, it's hollow to about there. Okay, I mean you could hollow it all the way down, and you could tell people that it is because they're not going to see it anyway. but I mean there's no reason to hollow that because no one's going to see it, and it's just that much extra. It's a lot of work. There's a lot of work to get this to look like a horn before you do any of the textures or colors on it.
Right.
Every section inside is carved to be a nice curve. When you even though that this is turned and it's round and it's got a little bit of a curve this way, when you turn it, when you put it together, it's like these little flat segments as it goes around. And so you need to carve it to give it the nice smooth curvature. Okay. And so then after it's all put together, carved, then you got to lay out your design on there. And with these, I normally have fields or panels to texture in different ways. So the panels on here happen to be helical, spiral. So they're spiral type things. And here's one that's sort of a teardrop shape. And so each one of those panels is going to have a different kind of a texture to it. So this is the step pattern, but it's stepped in a star shape. Okay. And smooth is okay too on this one. And then here's just some different textures. This part is copper. Oh, yeah. That's copper that's been textured, hammered, annealed, heated, and all that. Drilled. They've got a bunch of holes in there. It's actually nailed in place with little brass nails.
Okay. How many hours does it take you?
Way more than it should. A lot. I don't know. I don't take time. Oh, the sandblasted piece that went around, that is sandblasted with color.
Oh.
So it's the same coloring technique as I was doing here, but on top of a sanded surface, or sandblasted surface.
You have to keep annealing the copper?
Yes. Yeah. When you hammer on copper, it's going to get work hard. Or if you bend it, it works hard. So you just heat it up, bright red, let it cool, or you can cool it too. I don't think copper matters. Who cares one way or the other? So one like this, the copper work on here is really difficult because It's compound. You can't just like take a flat piece and make it fit. So what I end up doing is I draw the pattern onto the finished horn, and then I take little pieces of paper and I make the pieces of paper match the pattern, and then I lay that out on a piece of copper. And then that's only going to get you close, because once you start hammering on the copper to give it texture, it's going to warp and change and move, and so then you've got to get it to fit on here, and then you might have to tweak it this way or move it that way. So this is the first one I made that actually has a lanyard. So where these come from, where the idea came from, was an exhibition that the AEW did down in Tampa. It was called Ceremony. Tampa? Yeah, maybe, I don't know. Anyway, I'm like, well, how do you make something to fit that exhibition? What is ceremony? So I went back to basics. I went, okay, well, how did my ancestors, celebrate? How did they have a ceremony? And, well, Irish, so we drank, and what did they drink out of? And so I found out that in the 800s and 900s, they drank out of something called an auric bullhorn. An auric bull is extinct now because they drank too much and needed too many horns. I don't know. At any rate, they're not around anymore. And if you were one of the elders, you had a really ornate one. And I thought, I could do that. Let's do that. So these are not auric bull horns, because an auric horn is like that, very simple, very basic little curve, and probably a little bit bigger. So I'm taking a little artistic license, making it me. But the process of making this is actually Michael Hoslick technique. I don't know if you've seen he's got these little worm boxes, and it's turned segments, cut apart, reassembled in these little shapes. I'm like, I bet you I could use that technique to do my horns. And so I ended up doing 3 or 4 like proof of concept things. I didn't hollow them. I just turned these things and I cut them apart, put them back together, and okay, yeah, we can do that. And then as you go, you realize that, all right, so I got to carve this inside of each one of these, and it's actually a lot of work. But if you do take a look at these, you'll see the different segments inside.
Okay. Thank you.
Just cluck and bring them around.
Yeah.
Yep. If you want to twist out the side, yeah. So what I do, these are the twist out the side. I lay them out in a natural spiral, and then I draw a line on it. When I glue it together, instead of having the line line up from top to bottom, I take and I turn them each a given amount, 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch, whatever. And I also found out that the more pieces you cut, the more of a spiral you can get. So if you cut 3 pieces out of that, you're not really going to get a lot of spiral. 20 pieces out of it, you can get a lot tighter curl at the end and all that.
You CA glue, you're checking together?
No, wood glue. So these are all end grain glue. Thank you for bringing that up. I wanted to point that out. When you cut this apart, I cut it apart with a bandsaw, and I've got a jig in that paper there. If anybody didn't get a paper, just send me an email. I can email you the file. But anyway, you're going to cut this at about 75 degrees. Each of those ends gets sanded flat on like a disc sander, nicely flat. Then you're going to take wood glue, yellow glue. I use Type Bond 3. That's just what I use in my shop. And you take 50% wood glue and 50% water, mix that up, and seal each one of those end grains. Let that dry, and then when you go to put it together, full strength glue, rub it back and forth, and that works just like super glue. It's in 5 seconds, or even in 5 minutes for sure, you're not going to get them apart. I had a student in my shop make one, and he glued one at the wrong place. And we tried with a chisel. It was only 10 minutes. And with a chisel, we couldn't get it apart. We had to take the bandsaw and recut it. Wow. So it's really fast. But if you don't do the sealing, the open grain sucks too much of the glue out of the joint, and it starves the joint of its adhesive. So that's what the glue and water mixture will do for you.
Oh, beautiful thing.
We gotta call it quits.
All right.
Hey, thank you.
Thanks for having us.